Hi, gang. Welcome to this week's bonus episode. Man, we covered a lot of ground in that last reading of Samuel. Boy,
Indeed.
howdy. So I want to start out with a thing that I think is on the top of all of our minds, and that is golden tumors.
I know it's not the top of my mind, always.
Haven't been able to
Ever
stop
since-
thinking about it. Yeah.
Ever since we read it, yes.
Well, here's the funny thing is, as we pointed out during the reading, that there are some translations, most notably the King James Version, that translates it to hemorrhoids instead of tumors.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of debate, fierce, passionate debate about this online.
It matters deeply what the difference is.
Yes, it matters deeply to people. So specifically, what originally said in the King James Version was that it described a plague of emerods, which is the archaic term for hemorrhoids, derived from the old French word hémorroïde.
Hémorroïde.
That's where it comes from. So emerods, but specifically that these emerods would smote the people in their quote unquote secret parts.
Right.
You
Wow.
know, and so a lot of people
There
are
it
like, it's
is.
the secret parts. Obviously, it's got to be hemorrhoids.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't it have been like HSV potentially?
It could have
or
been.
something?
It could have. Yes, there's plenty of scholars who translate it to just some kind of disease of the secret parts. Some people make the argument maybe it was actually an outbreak of bubonic plague.
Oh.
Other people say maybe it was the bites of camel spiders. Apparently,
Right.
I didn't know camels had spiders.
they had little baby spiders.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so there is like a lot of harsh debate. It seems like from what I can find that most like scholars who are in it to win it are on board with the hemorrhoid train, like not just tumors. That is like, yeah, straight up
Really?
hemorrhoids.
Yes. Because I felt like because I researched this a little bit because I was trying to look up stuff about the Philistines capturing the ark, and this came up as part of it. And it seemed to me like the predominant thing that people landed on was that it was tumors.
Well, I guess it kind of depends on who you talk to
Yeah,
now.
I guess so.
And then researching this topic led me down a really weird rabbit hole of like a lot of late 90s looking websites.
Okay. Love those.
A lot of like
favorite.
late 90s atheist blogs, actually.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah, because I guess they love holding this up as like, look at how weird the Bible is.
Right,
You know?
right.
And let's make fun of it because it's so funny and my website looks like shit. Anyway, but not just the atheist bloggers, also, the Christian scholars who also had crappy looking websites in the late 90s, early 2000s. But one scholar talked about the fact that like, oh, it makes sense that God would give them hemorrhoids because hemorrhoids back in that day, like sometimes curing hemorrhoids was even worse than the hemorrhoids themselves, so it was maybe much more of a serious affliction than it is for us today.
Huh.
Okay.
And that's true. This did lead me down a rabbit hole now of reading about Hippocrates of Hippocratic Oath fame,
Right.
and what he
Okay.
wrote about how to resolve hemorrhoids. I'm not
Wow,
going to
you
tell
really
you
got in
'cause
depth
it's
Yeah,
to
you
this,
really-
Dedeker.
I got right up in there.
God.
I'm not going to read this because it's really gross and painful. And
We're going to
awful.
spare the listener.
Yeah, but basically, Hippocrates had a couple of his favorite solutions for hemorrhoids. Both of them involved laying the patient over 2 round stones upon his knees. And whatever you're doing to get rid of the hemorrhoid is really horrible and painful and stuff like that. But my favorite line was that he writes, and this should be accomplished without the patient's knowledge while he is kept in conversation.
Okay.
Is there a way in which he wouldn't know what was happening down
Well,
there? Would he just
well,
be
I
like
think it's like-
100% oblivious to
He
it?
knows something's going on down south, but it's kind of like, I don't know, what I appreciate about when I go to a good gynecologist is that like when they're doing the most uncomfortable parts of the pap smear that's right when they've asked you, oh, so like where were you just traveling? And then I'm in
Yeah.
the middle
Thankfully-
of talking about that and
Yep.
then
Yeah.
not focused on the pain. So
Yeah, totally.
I see.
I think it's the ancient version of a good gynecologist. Hippocrates was.
Hippocrates,
All right.
okay, great.
That's everything I learned about golden tumors. Oh, that was the other thing, is also down this rabbit hole. So many artistic renditions of what golden tumors / golden hemorrhoids might look like.
Yeah, because remember we had our
great.
like wooden butt mounting with the golden hemorrhoid attached to it.
You had your wooden butt mounting. Let me remind you.
What were the artistic renditions? Could you paint us a word picture of what kind of stuff you found? Were they just blobs? Just blobs of
in
gold?
your head, imagine a golden hemorrhoid, and
I don't even know what a hemorrhoid looks like.
Yeah,
but I could imagine a tumor more than a hemorrhoid.
Just
but
imagine kind of like an ass tumor a little bit, and then you'll have the beginning of an idea.
But with
gold,
a butt to go with it, or just a blob of gold. That's what I keep feeling like it's just going to look like a blob.
I'd like to think that it's like a rod, and then like protruding from the rod are like little boiled balls of gold, just like going every which way. It's kind of like a Legend of Zelda boss,
this is getting
later
more and
on
more
in the
elaborate.
game.
That classic,
The longer you go
classic hemorrhoid boss that you fight.
No,
in
there is
Zelda.
one. The one inside Jabu's belly. It looks like it has hemorrhoids like on the outside of its body. It's really gross.
Ew.
All you Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time fans know what I'm talking about. So yes. Anyways, that was beautiful, Dedeker. Thank you for that. I will not stop thinking about hemorrhoids now. I will continue to not stop thinking about it. Jace, you had some more interesting fun about the Ark, correct?
Yeah, so I was trying to look into the Philistines. I keep wanting to call them the Philistines because in that Samson and Delilah movie that I watched, that's how they pronounce it, the Philistines. So I was reading up on the Ark of the Covenant, and when you look up stuff about the Ark, there's a lot of other things. Like a lot of the blogs out there and stuff are more about like theorizing about where is it now, how did it get lost, and not about this specific instance of it getting taken. But I did find some stuff about it that was kind of interesting.
There's no conspiracy theories that the Philistines actually swapped out like a dummy Ark, and they've had it this whole time.
Oh, that's cool.
You should write that one because I didn't find that one. And then they gave it to the
Nazis. I love it.
And then they gave it to the Nazis. Yeah, exactly.
Straight to the Nazis from there.
I didn't find anything about that. What I did find, though, is kind of a little more nuance about sort of what happened with it. And essentially, it's that the bad things that happened actually sort of, if you look at more of the Apocrypha and some of the other writings, you'll find it got worse at each city it went to instead of just being the same at all of them. I had more the impression it was just the same. But that it's like at the first one, let me see if I can find this section here. But yeah, basically like at the first one, they got the hemorrhoids, and at the second one is where they also got the mice. And then another one, it says extensive tumors and panic. And then the next one is like tumors on those who did not die. Like, so as in it killed a bunch and gave tumors to others. And so I guess the idea it kept kind of getting worse. One thing that was interesting, though, is kind of about the fact that it mentioned the mice, too, which in some translations it calls rats.
We forgot about it. Yeah.
Because in ancient Hebrew at the time, there was no distinction between mice and rats. They were all rice.
Rice and mats.
Yeah. Between mice and rats, there was no distinction. So language-wise, right? There was just the one word for them. So one potential theory is that actually what happened was an outbreak of bubonic plague, which causes growths, which would have been the tumors, and then
that falls in line with kind of the other theories that I ran into also.
Right, and then that's why the rats are there too. So it's not just about like how do we translate this one word, but like why did we mention mice or rats? It's like oh well, if you think about it that way, then that connection is there. They also, some of the stuff I read tried to make a parallel between this and the plagues of Egypt, like a similar thing of Yahweh or God using plagues, using, boils essentially to get freedom again. Although this time, weirdly, freedom just for the Ark and not, although I guess it did lead to the people getting free of the Philistines because they were also, I think, enslaved by them at the time.
Okay.
But also at the cost of killing like that entire group of people. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'm going to get to that in a second, but before I get to that, so the other thing is that the timeline of when this actually happened is up for some debate. So it's in 1 Samuel here near the beginning, but there's some scholars who actually believe that this belongs timeline-wise near the beginning of 2 Samuel, and that this is actually part of the rise of King David, and not actually, because Samuel's never mentioned in the story at all until kind of like afterward. And so there's sort of a theory that this account was in a different document that kind of got stuck here when really it should have been in the other place. So anyway, that's just kind of fun thing to think about. Wow. But okay, so Beth Shemesh. So they attach those 2 milky coos and drive it off with the wagon with the ark and all the gold tumors and mice. And it goes to this town of Beth Shemesh where they all worship and stuff. And then a bunch of them die. And so I also wanted to look into that. And what I found was interesting is I found, first of all, a website called TindallArchive.com. And immediately I was like, I love you.
Piqued your interest immediately, of
course. It's got my boy Tindall's name in there. But this particular one is called The Tragedy at Beth Shemesh. And it's actually exploring the different ways that passage has been translated across the Septuagint as well as the many, many translations of this. And there's essentially 4 factors to this story that are slightly different in different accounts. Number 1 is why the people were killed. 2 is who was killed exactly amongst that group. 3 is how many were killed. And then that's it. That's really the 3. And then the 4th question here is what's up with the number 50, which we also asked, but this article...
numbers.
This article here did not, I think, answer the question of why the number 50, but it did do an interesting job exploring the others. And so it lists out that verse in a bunch of different translations. And just to give you kind of an example here, we've got something like, some of these are a little wackier than others. Here's a translation. It says, "The sons of Jeconiah, however, did not rejoice along with the men of Beth Shemesh when they saw the ark of the Eternal. So he struck 50,070 of them, and the folk mourned, because the Eternal had smitten the folk with a heavy slaughter."
Right. There was that weird kind of hanging 70 also.
Right. And then, let's see, here's another one. And he went striking down the men of Beth Shemesh, because they had looked upon the ark of Jehovah. So he struck down among the people 70 men, 50,000 men. The people began mourning because Jehovah struck
what?
Yes.
He started with 70, had to warm up, and then
50,000.
Did the big 50,000?
Gracious. Okay, here's a totally different one. "And he smiteth among the men of Beth Shemesh, for they looked into the ark of Jehovah. Yea, he smiteth among the people 70 men, 50 chief men, and the people mourned."
Very different.
Right?
Very, very different.
So the 50 were the really important ones.
Potentially, yeah.
Or the 70, the what?
Here's the most confusing, I think, is from the King James. "And he smote the men of Beth Shemesh, because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. And he smote of the people 50,060 men."
That makes perfect sense. 430 men ago.
Yeah. So anyway, basically they kind of summed it up, and there's a few things. So one is the reason why they died. And in one of those translations I read, it was a group it was one particular family that didn't celebrate with everyone else. He killed them. In another one, it was that he killed whoever because they looked into the ark. In another one, he killed the people who did worship at the ark. Or another one, they killed people because they weren't priests who went up to the ark. So there's like a bunch of subtly different explanations of it. Was it this sons of Jeconiah, or was it just people in general? Was it chiefs, or was it commoners? It's like unclear. And
was it just some fools accidentally discharged the power of the ark?
Potentially,
that was an accident. It was a mistake, and now we're trying to figure out, why would Yahweh let that happen?
Yeah.
Well, like, what conclusions can you draw from all of that, and like all the differences that people have in what they think happened?
I mean, that's the problem, is that essentially this article covered the fact that this particular passage has been for 2,000 years has been one that translators have struggled with, just being like, what really is this supposed to say? And yeah, it could be anywhere from 70 men with 50 of them being chiefs, all the way up to 50,000, or 5,070. Sorry, 50,000. So yeah, some 5,000, some 50,000. It's just nuts.
Nobody knows.
And then
wow.
in some, it only killed people from Jaconius's family. In others, it killed people of the village. And in others, it killed people of the village as well as oxen and bulls that were owned by the villagers.
Huh.
So it's just this
They didn't do anything.
Yeah, so it's just weird. It's just a real...
They didn't even choose to be a part of that family.
Yeah.
Wow.
We'll never know.
No, we probably won't. I don't know. Maybe God will tell us one day what actually happened. But I was very interested in the whole story of Eli just in general, because as we're reading it, I was like, Eli doesn't really seem like that bad of a guy. And he was the one who sort of raised Samuel. And so, shouldn't he get some points for that? And so I wanted to look up, more on what the whole deal with Eli was and why he basically got such a bad punishment with his two sons and stuff later on.
Right.
And so, of course, when I do this, I end up going down a rabbit hole of finding a really Christian blog on the subject.
Yeah, you do have a knack for finding these real apologist blogs.
Finding the most Christian of blogs.
But it is interesting to me because it's not something that I would think of in terms of this story. So to me, I think it is kind of fascinating to be like, oh, okay, so that's what somebody who's really faith-based thinks about this particular thing. So I didn't realize, but this person found the fact that, Samuel didn't already know who God was at the beginning of that story to be a big bad deal, a big problem. And it's because I guess Eli didn't tell Samuel already, this is who God is. He may speak to you one day. So if you hear something like that, then you should already be aware of it, kind of thing. So he was very upset.
I've never heard that interpretation before.
I know. I found it to be a little weird, but it was he should have been made familiar with him already. And this is a very serious dereliction of duty on the part of Eli. I know, that was interesting.
What an interpretation.
Wow.
I know, but and this guy is I'm not being too harsh on Eli because Eli has a pattern of not doing well to his kids or people who he's bringing up because his sons are wicked men.
Right, they were jerkheads.
Yeah, and I guess Eli does tell his sons off, but this guy he doesn't like the fact that the rebuke is weak of Eli to his sons. What he should have done, according to this guy, is cast him out, cast the sons out of being a part of the priesthood in any sense. And the fact that he didn't do that is a big problem. Yes, Jace.
Now this might be a reach, but part of me thinks that the person writing this article is trying to justify the fact that they kicked out their gay son from the house or something like that.
Oh, God.
I know that's really dark,
Jeez.
but that's what it feels like to me. It feels like someone who's trying to justify a complete lack of compassion for how you treat your children.
I mean, maybe. It just says, it's when it is called to his attention, meaning the fact that the sons are bad boys, he gives a verbal rebuke, but he must do more than this. They have acted so scandalously that they must be removed. They are a threat to others by their exploitative and opportunistic behavior. They should have been removed. It's a true fact that we struggled with this very same thing in the clergy sexual abuse scandal of recent years. This was written in 2012, by the way. That's fascinating that he talks about that and goes there.
Yeah.
But so I guess God rebukes Eli for his weak rebuke, and then he basically says God cannot allow Eli and his sons to minister at Shiloh any longer. And so, Samuel is going to take up the priesthood, and Hophni and Phinehas will die for their sins, and Eli's line is at an end. So Yeah, fascinating. And so basically this guy thinks that like this whole story is about that in general. Like this part of the story of Samuel and Eli is basically telling parents you need to instill like God and fear of God within your children from a very young age so that they know when they're really young, like, okay, maybe God is going to come to me. And this guy also talks about how when he was very young praying, like one of his earliest memories was being 5 years old and talking to God while he was praying. And then, yeah, he's like, I don't feel God in his presence as much anymore because I grew older and the flesh became more alive, is what he said. I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? I have no idea.
He's like, sadly, as I grew older and the flesh became more alive, I lost my ability to hear the still small voice of the Lord. I'm like, okay.
This is getting down. I think this is getting down and dirty with somebody's personal relationship with the Lord.
No, it definitely is. But anyways, so that was interesting. So this was one person's interpretation of why Eli and the story of Eli is like such a big deal. But I found that to be very interesting. And I guess it's just like a cautionary tale to all your parents out there. Like tell your kids from an early age, like how big and bad God is, and that if you don't obey him and you don't obey me, then you're going to die and I'm going to die and it's going to be terrible. Jeez. Just like Eli. The end.
Wow, what a great uplifting lesson there.
It's a good bedtime story.
Yeah, remember when I said a few weeks ago that Emily should teach a Sunday school class? I take it all back. Definitely not.
There it is. No, I obviously am not the person who should do that in any capacity. But yeah, anyways, that was fascinating. And I'm excited now that we've kind of moved through a lot of the story of Samuel, like kind of what's going to happen here, because it almost felt like an ending at the end of the last episode. It was like, and Samuel ruled for X amount of years or whatever, like he judged for this many years. And I was like, okay, so is that it?
Yeah.
But it's clearly not. We have a lot of Samuel left.
I did learn also that I was a little bit mistaken about Samuel and it being about his kids in those generations. It's not. It's Samuel's from the priest line, right? He's the new priest, but the kings are separate from the priests. So it's about all of the different kings that happened during the time of Samuel. But it's not really about Samuel, but it's supposedly written by him, although modern scholars say it was actually collected from various works. But it's more the idea that Samuel wrote this story, I guess.
Interesting.
So that was something I learned recently. I was like, dang it.
Dang it? Okay, well, that'll be fun. Cool, well, we will see you all next time for the next episode and more of 1 Samuel.